if you can find a way to make money doing something that you would do for free, you are the luckiest person in the world, because maybe like less than 0.1% of us get to do that. And I encourage anyone out there that should be the holy grail of your existence, is find a way to wake up every morning, do something you love immensely, and somehow get paid to do it. Like you're going to be the happiest person in the world.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another edition of the Beer Mile Podcast. Today, we have an exclusive interview with Nick Symmonds. Admittedly, he reveals a lot on this podcast that he hasn't said to any other podcast or on his YouTube channel yet, so you are in for a treat. He talks about his favorite whiskey, how to get your pilot's license, Paris Hilton, his goal of reaching 1 million subscribers on YouTube, his professional running career, his career in the beer mile, and a whole lot more. And he gives us some tips and tricks for how we should grow the sport of the beer mile.
Yeah, as well as for our listeners, if you're entrepreneurs, definitely recommend listening to this episode. He gives a ton of insights into how he's grown his brand, as well as contributed to Run Gum and the other business adventures that he's taken on.
Nick is definitely an entrepreneur at heart. A lot of advice out there for aspiring entrepreneurs, as well as this isn't your typical podcast that's boring. We're just going to ask him about his running career, etc. Yeah. We touch on that a little bit, but how many times do you need to talk about the same old, hey, what was your workout at leading into that 2011 World Championship?
How did you feel about your splits for the 2012?
Exactly. Nick is a lot more than splits around a track, and so that's why it was so exciting to hit on all these other aspects of his life. And of course, as the Beer Mile Podcast, we did touch on the beer mile, his favorite beer, his favorite whiskey, crazy challenges that he's looking forward to doing. So we kind of touched on it all, to be honest.
Yeah, Nick is a very multi-dimensional person. Hopefully this interview gave a lot of insight into that, and we hope you enjoy it.
And after the interview, because we don't want to take away from the interview, we want to get right into it, we'll talk about our beer of the week, Tank 7 from Boulevard Brewing Company. So stay tuned for that after the interview is over. But with that, let's dive right in to Mr. Nick Symmonds, Big Nick Energy.
Hey, you got the hat. Good.
So
those have been out of stock for a while. You're lucky.
Yeah.
I think we bring them back next week. Yeah. I wear mine every day, as you've probably seen.
We definitely have. Awesome. So today on the Beer Mile Podcast, we have a very special guest, the man that doesn't need any introduction, but we'll give him a very brief one anyway. Nick Symmonds, 2-time Olympian, silver medal on the world stage, as well as 6-time U.S. national champion on the outdoor track. On top of that, he's an entrepreneur, CEO of Run Gum. He's a content creator, and also, perfect for this podcast, he has dabbled in the beer mile as well, former beer mile American record holder. And so for all of those reasons, we're really excited to have Nick on today. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Quite the intro there.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And to kick off, crazy year 2020 with COVID and everything going on. First of all, congratulations on the wedding. Curious how that went in the era of COVID.
We pulled it off. Yeah. So I got engaged to my longtime girlfriend May of 2019. And we talked about what we wanted our wedding to look like. I'm like, you know what? I'm not a big fan of weddings. Like, what if we just did like an immediate family only wedding in the backyard? And she's like, I love that. That's exactly what I always envisioned. So that's what we were planning. And then COVID hits and everyone's saying, cancel all the weddings. You're allowed to have 10 people as long as they're, your immediate family. And I'm like, babe, I think we had always planned for a COVID-19 wedding. So nothing changed. Like, I take that back. We were going to do a reception at the local brewery and that was closed. So instead I just bought a whole bunch of beer and cooked steaks at my house. So it was awesome. Pretty much the exact same thing we had planned. The vendors were great. Like the photographer came down and she was happy to shoot and we pulled it off. It was a really nice ceremony.
That's excellent. I kind of would have figured with, the number of people that at this point in your life, and I'm sure your wife as well, that you would have wanted some elaborate big celebration, but kind of low key was always your go-to.
One of the things that I think people are always surprised to hear is that I'm a very private person. I love my alone time. Like the happiest place in the world for me is just on my boat by myself. Like the version, not the version of myself, but the side of my personality that comes alive on camera. I love that side of me, but it's probably not my default. My default is more insular and private. So when it comes to my family or, personal events like that, I keep it pretty small. That's not to say I don't love the other side. Like we just got back from California where we shot a bunch of videos and I got to say hi to my fans, and my ego needs that. I need that side of my life, and I absolutely love it. But I am a very private person, probably, more so than I let on online.
Fair enough. That's how you restore the energy, between all
true.
of those extroverted
everyone,
experiences.
I always laugh because everyone calls people, I'm an introvert or I'm an extrovert, and really it's a spectrum, right? And I would say I recharge my batteries by being by myself, but the minute that battery's charged, all I want to do is go like hang out with people and interact with my fans and do podcasts like this. Like I love talking to people, but my battery wears out pretty quick, and then it's back to fishing on the boat, drinking beers.
We were saying like one of the reasons why it was so exciting to have you on is because at least like in our younger years, you felt like one of the most accessible pro runners out there, really. Like we felt like we could really connect with you and
Thanks.
We could relate to.
Yeah. And I think running is one of those sports where it should be that way, right? It's not like basketball where you need a team. And I guess, there's some pickup, but like, you're not going to go on a run or go pick up basketball with LeBron James. But I always thought, how cool is it that running is so accessible? And whenever I'd travel, I could say, hey, I'm going to be running at, Holes Gulch in Boise on this morning, if anyone wants to join. Like it is a sport that caters to inclusiveness so well. And it is a very inclusive sport across the spectrum. So I always thought, maybe I'm not the fastest guy, but I'm the guy that is the most approachable and the one that's going to spend the most time, trying to build a fan base and interacting with those fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of speaks to the audience you've grown on YouTube as well. I mean, I think of runners like Galen Rupp. Like I'm absolutely astonished at what he accomplishes. He's super fast, obviously, but he's someone I don't really find myself rooting for necessarily just because I know nothing about him. His personal life, it's all hidden. So having that connection with someone is huge.
Yeah. I was never good. Listen, I know my limitations. I know how talented Galen Rupp is and the skill set he has. And I look left at David Rudisha and I look right, and I'm just like, listen, I wasn't dealt that particular skill set. Like I can't focus the way that Galen can, to be able to train as hard as he does. And I wasn't born with genetic gifts that David Rudisha has, but the skill set I was born with was, just a love for building an audience, a love for creation. And I love that you guys called me a content creator rather than an influencer. I mean, sure, we try to influence sometimes, but I love creating content. Like, I think one thing that people are always surprised is that I would make YouTube videos if I wasn't paid to. Like, I am obsessed with YouTubing. I love nothing more than creating a great YouTube video that people really find entertaining or inspirational. So the skill set that I have is a little bit different. And in some ways it's kind of nice because it transcends the pro side of things. Like I always knew my legs, this lottery ticket genetic gift that were my legs, had an expiration date. And the whole time I was thinking, what can I be building that transcends the end of that career? And so whether it was on Facebook initially, then Twitter, then Instagram, and now YouTube, there have been some phenomenal ways to bring people along for the ride that doesn't involve just running 2 laps around the track fast.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've said in other podcasts that I've listened to that if you regret anything, it's that you didn't start some of that sooner.
100%. Or that I didn't put more of my time in. So, as a pro runner, you train really hard. Like I'd work out from like 8 to noon in the mornings, and then again from 5 to 6, 4 to 6 in the afternoons. There's a lot of downtime in there still, and I was good about building out my social channels and my audience. But true to this day, my biggest regret is not starting a YouTube channel earlier. I had content that people wanted to see. I should have been posting my workouts online, and I was always very transparent and happy to share my training. In fact, I published my entire 2012 Olympic training log. You can get it for free at rungum.com. I loved that. I loved showcasing that. Why wasn't I posting those workouts online? I should have been uploading them to YouTube. I'd have 10 million subscribers by now.
I mean, we would have loved seeing it. That's for sure.
It's the kind of niche content that is what makes YouTube so special. When I go onto YouTube, and I look through my feed, it's videos that are absolutely cherry picked for me. It's aviation, it's running, it's lifting, it's everything I love, fishing, everything I love, just perfectly curated for me. And if you go and look at my wife's, it's very, very different. It's a lot of Louis Vuitton tutorial, or I don't even know what to say. Louis Vuitton like showcases, product reviews, I guess,
right. Unboxing,
and dog videos and the things that she loves, which is awesome that we have a platform that can perfectly curate content for us like that. And the niche content is a really great way to start to build an audience. And I would have had just the perfect niche content. So yeah, I do regret that. But there's only so many hours in a day. There's so many pieces of energy throughout a day. And I was trying to allocate as many of those minutes and as much of that energy towards running as fast as possible. I don't think that's the wrong thing to do. And touching back on Galen Rupp, that is his special skill set.
Right.
His ability to put everything else to the side and just train harder than anyone else. He is phenomenal at that.
Absolutely.
You talk about like stacking skill sets. I think we talked about it in an earlier episode where the beer mile is like just taking these two things that you're really good at, like drinking and running. Like for you, it almost feels like you've gone from something that you were obviously amazing at with running to almost something that you're even better at, like building on top of your talent, your transparency, your ability to connect with people. Like,
I appreciate you saying that.
Do you feel like you're like accelerating in your career?
So, well, I'll take that as a huge compliment. So thank you for that. First of all, I think I stumbled across something halfway through my career. Like when I first signed my pro deal in 2006 with Nike, I'm like, I'm going to run so fast and I'm going to get paid so well for running fast. And true, you can run fast and get paid really well. Like, I wouldn't call Galen Rupp particularly entertaining except when he's running, but he's so good at that he gets paid really well to do that.
Right.
But conversely, I know some athletes that aren't that good at running, but they're so freaking entertaining that they get tons of brand deals, right? And you can see this on Instagram right now. The most followed Instagram runners aren't particularly good. They're just really entertaining, right? So I kind of saw this as social media, and I happen to be an older millennial, so I was like on the forefront of this as social media was starting to be monetized. I'm looking at people like Lolo Jones was always, especially early on, because she's about the same age as I was. She was making more than anybody else, but she wasn't necessarily winning as much as some of the other athletes. She was just so transparent and so good with her audience. And I thought, man, I need to be more like Lolo. Like I wasn't trying to aspire to be more like Galen. I was trying to aspire to be more like Lolo. And as the role of influencer or content creator became larger and larger, it just hit me upside the head that this has the ability to transcend my ability to run fast. There will come a time where Galen Rupp can't run fast and can't monetize that particular skill.
Right.
But Lolo's always going to be able to monetize who Lolo is because she's very personable and very good on camera and good at interacting with her fans. So yeah, so I would say I recognized, especially later on in my career, that content creation does have a very important place in an entrepreneur's life. And moreover, that I was getting older and slower by the minute, and that I would need to fall back on that other skill set as my ability to run fast was fading.
Definitely. And was there a specific point that you remember, any sort of memory of when that light switch kind of flipped, or was it kind of a gradual thing over time where you just recognize that, each day that goes on, you want to do a little bit more of your time invested in building that brand and everything outside of just the track itself?
I think for me, the first inclination was when we launched Run Gum. As an entrepreneur, especially because we launched originally Run Gum, which can be found nationwide in Target and Walmart, and a lot of people know us, from that. But we were a direct-to-consumer brand really early on. Like we launched as a direct-to-consumer brand back in 2014. And so the way we sold Run Gum was by Instagram posts and tweets and Facebook posts saying, go to rungum.com and buy this product. And so that's when I recognized content creation, not just for Nike or Brooks, which were my sponsors, and that was important, but for my own company. And I thought to myself, I always want to be an entrepreneur. I'm always going to want to drive traffic to the sites that sell my products. The bigger I can get my audience, the better that's going to be. It just took me so long to figure out how to do that. Like those of you who have been following me for, the better part of a decade, I was okay with these various platforms, but I really didn't hit my viral moment until we launched the YouTube channel. And I actually had people for years saying, you should start a YouTube channel. You should start a YouTube channel. I'm like, it sounds like a lot of work, and YouTube's just for silly cat videos. Once I really sat down and became a consumer of YouTube content, that's when I recognized where my niche was going to be and how I could find success on the platform.
Yeah. I mean, I would push back on that a little bit. You were always so aware of kind of like the power and influence that the forces around you. So like, if you think about all of the advertising that's in running, of most athletes were aware of that. I mean, you had the lawsuit in 2015, 2013, and
somewhere in there.
something like that. And
the beer mile. The beer mile was my first PR stunt. We can get into that here in a minute, but
yeah,
I recognize what you're saying is that I tried to be entertaining off the track too. This is less about social media and it's more about traditional PR. And I happen to be, again, an old millennial where we're seeing traditional PR kind of fall off as social media rises. Before I recognized the power of social media for what it is today, I recognized that I needed to have eyeballs on what I was doing on and off the track. And so I was trying to get what we call earned media. I was trying to, and you get earned media by running fast. That's a great way to get earned media. I was also trying to get earned media by doing silly things, right? So the beer mile was a stunt. Going on a date with Paris Hilton was a stunt. Selling space on my body on eBay before the games was a stunt. They were calculated PR plays to get traditional media to write about me. Now, I don't need to do that anymore because we use YouTube and other ways of getting that attention. But there was a time where I was like, I need people to know what I'm doing. And I have ways of getting the media to pay attention to me. Call it, what do people always say, like exhibitionist or a PR horror or whatever phrase you want to use it.
Right.
That's a huge compliment to me.
Right.
Like I want eyeballs on what I'm doing to make it relevant so that I can ultimately sell a pair of Nikes. Like that's the whole point of.
And it's a calculated transition to where you are now, for sure.
Yeah, and it was a smart transition too. I think some of that stuff was getting a little gimmicky and not authentic, and it's not sustainable. Like, the Paris Hilton date, that was awesome. Like, don't get me wrong. But it was a little bit gimmicky and not as authentic as what I'm doing now, which, like, when I look into the camera, whether it's on, my main YouTube channel or my secondary YouTube channel, which I think is even more authentic, it's like, guys, what I'm telling you right now is what I've learned. And I don't have all the answers. I'm only 36, but what I've learned over the last, 15 years as a professional and an entrepreneur. This is what works for me. This is what hasn't worked for me. This is what I think could work for you.
Right. And I will say, it's nice to hear that you call out that it, to some extent, that it's gimmicky and that it's part of building the brand. But I will also say that you use the platform to stand up for important issues as well, such as gay rights, for example, being one of those. And
thanks.
Also,
that was a no-brainer to me. Yeah,
exactly. And being pro athlete overall. So even though sure, maybe there's the angle of it as well that you're building the brand, et cetera. I think at the same time, it still was putting to the forefront issues that typically runners they show up, they run their fast times, but you don't ever hear what happens behind the scenes most of the times with those shoot contracts, with any endorsements, et cetera. And so bringing those to the forefront got the conversation going where people are started questioning, what sort of rights does a woman have as a pro runner, when she gets pregnant? What sort of paycheck is someone getting from New Balance to Brooks to Nike? Right. So I think all of those were also big pieces of it that really came out of it.
I appreciate that. And I look back at, my 20-something-year-old self and, I love to run my mouth, and I still do, don't get me wrong. It's a little different in 2020. And it's a little bit different when I'm talking about, running related things. Like when I'm talking about the disparity in paying across brands or across genders, like that's something that I'm somewhat of an expert in. But when you start talking about politics of 2020, like I'm not necessarily an expert in that, so I'm just probably going to be a lot quieter and listen to the experts on that. But yeah, in my younger days, I saw how messed up track and field is still very messed up. But when I was really into it and being affected by it on a daily basis, I couldn't help but be like, guys, this is insane. Are you seeing how much money USATF is taking from the athletes? Like, there's that scene in Zoolander where he throws his hands up. He's like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills here. That's how I felt for like the majority of my professional career, especially as I became a businessman and learned how money worked and learned just how many billions, not millions, billions and billions of dollars are in running, and how all of that money is just taken from the athletes and they're tossed a bunch of pennies and then fed the biggest piece of BS that's ever been said, which is help us grow the pie and the pie will be bigger for you. The pie is massive. It is a massive pie, both in running and in professional track and field. It's just that the powers that be take every single penny for themselves.
Right.
Absolutely.
So talk about two things. One is your transition from really being like a runner to an entrepreneur, and how, that affected your worldview, or how that influenced your worldview of money. And then two.
I don't want to get distracted. Go ahead and with two, but if I forget number two, then you have to remind me.
You start with one. I've got number two written down.
Okay. I may answer number two here. We'll see. What I will say is, and any aspiring professional athlete is certainly a professional runner. The day you sign your first pro deal, you are an entrepreneur. So I think a lot of us think that when we see Galen Rupp, we assume that Galen Rupp is an employee. Well, maybe he's not a good example because he might actually be an employee of Nike. But like, if you look at the guys that run for Oregon Track Club Elite, and I can use them because I was that guy,
Right.
They're not employees of Oregon Track Club Elite, and they're not employees of Nike. They're independent contractors, which, pretty much makes them an entrepreneur. So I was savvy enough, I would say, that when I signed my first pro deal, I recognized that I was an independent contractor. There are a lot of negatives associated with that, but there's a million positives if you know how to use that position. So I would say my first dipping my toes into the world of entrepreneurial business was when I became a pro runner, and I incorporated. I have Nick Symmonds LLC to this day that I still use to bring in my money as a content creator, which was originally founded to bring in my money as a professional runner.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I started creating businesses, right, I created a franchise here in Oregon with my business partner that we ultimately sold. We created Run Gum. I mean, I've created and sold several businesses at this point, but I would say probably towards my late 20s when I recognized, I probably only have, few more really good years of running in me, and then I need to figure out what I want to do. The thought of going and working for Nike or working for Adidas, it didn't resonate with me. I did not want to do that. I just love entrepreneurial business, and I was willing to take the roller coaster. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you better buckle up. It will be a roller coaster. And here's the thing, you have to like it. You have to appreciate that and want it for yourself. You can't just tolerate it and say, well, it's one of the negatives of being an entrepreneur. I guess I have to put up with the roller coaster. You have to wake up and say, I wouldn't do anything else, because the roller coaster is even more so than the money or the freedom. It's what makes me feel alive. Right. Like knowing that I'm going to wake up and I have absolutely no idea what's going to be in my inbox. Like that's exciting to me. It could be a massive fire that I have to put out that day, but it could also be a massive opportunity. And every morning I wake up and I look at that phone, just kind of like, all right, what do you got for me today? Yeah, here we go. So that's how I would answer that. Is just, like it was a gradual transition, but the day I turned pro, I recognized that I was an entrepreneur, and I pretty much recognized that I wanted to be an entrepreneur for the rest of my life.
Yeah. It's who do you want to work for, right? Like, do you want to build your brand for another company, or do you want to build your brand for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the reasons I was drawn to running in the first place, and I've said this in my books, I've said this on multiple podcasts, I loved that distance running paid me dividends. The harder I worked, the more success I had.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're on a team, and I grew up playing competitive soccer, that's not always the case. Mm-hmm. I could work harder than every single person on the team and not get as much playing time. Right. And that just seemed so like counterintuitive to me. So when I found this crazy sport of distance running and recognized that I could work harder than other people and that it would ultimately lead to my success, that just seemed like, even though I didn't love running, like that one thing about it just resonated with me. And so in entrepreneurial business, it's very similar. The harder I work, the smarter, savvier worker I am, the more it's going to pay me. Mm-hmm. So the idea of working for somebody has just never really resonated with me because one, I don't need the security. Like I don't embrace the security, which is the main motivator for a lot of people to become employees is the security. That doesn't have an added value to me. And two, going back to just the harder I work, the more I'm going to succeed, the more it's going to benefit me. It's really hard for me to imagine working for somebody. I think the last time I worked for somebody, I delivered flowers in college for a local florist. And the guy is this really old florist. He was amazing. I loved working for him and his wife. Best job in the world, right? I'd get there after practice, load up my van with flowers and just spend the whole day driving around delivering flowers. It was an awesome job. I worked for like $6 an hour. But even just having him say, all right, Nick, I need you in at this time and this is what you're going to do. It just was just like nails on a chalkboard for me.
Yeah.
And even owning my own business, I can't be held to a schedule. There are days I come in here at noon. There's days I come in here at 4 a.m. Like I hustle when I feel like hustling, and I like that lifestyle. It works for me.
Right. I'm curious in that transition from professional running to, full-time entrepreneur, CEO of Run Gum. I guess at that point, Run Gum was pretty established. Was there ever a question on, I guess, financial security or anything like that?
Yeah.
Or were you already having enough income on the side from Run Gum at that point?
Here's a true story. I'm not going to use figures because I have NDAs with previous,
of course,
contracts. But I went from making really good money with Brooks in 16 and 17 to $0.0 in 2018. Like I had no income because I wasn't taking a salary from Run Gum.
Okay.
My Brooks contract had just expired. My social channels, weren't where they are today, so I couldn't really monetize them. I hadn't started YouTubing really. So like you go from making just fantastic money to basically making the equivalency of $0. That was a gut check.
Yeah.
Now I had some savings and I was living off that and I could have sold assets, but from a cash flow standpoint, it was an absolute just catastrophic year. And I said to myself, like, I don't like this feeling of not having a really good cash flow. And I want to build out multiple streams of revenue for myself. And I want the financial security that I had the last, half dozen years. So it led to some changes with Run Gum. First of all, we raised money. Like we had built this great company, but we had done it on our own. We had bootstrapped it and never raised capital. We raised outside capital so that I could start taking a salary. Step one. Once I had that box ticked, then I'm like, okay, now how do I resurrect Nick Symmonds LLC? Which I had actually called my accountant and said, I'm going to just shut it down because I'm not making pro running money anymore. Mm-hmm. And my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, thank God, she said, no, don't do that. It's too valuable. You're such a good content creator. You have to figure out a way to just create content that isn't running professionally. And it took me a few months, or maybe the better part of a year to really find my voice online as a has-been runner.
Yeah.
But I was able to find that and ultimately create a really valuable revenue stream through YouTube and through the other things that I do with Nick Symmonds LLC. So
right
today I would say I'm far surpassed what I was making back as a pro runner, but it was a rocky road to get here. And go ahead.
I was just gonna say, did you ever consider looking for other work, or were you always still, regardless, you were still like, I'm set on, finding my way, even if there was no cash flow for, a certain amount of time?
I never considered going and like applying for jobs, but I did I called a couple friends, like Jesse Thomas is a good friend. He's the CEO of Picky Bars. And I'm like, Jesse, can you give me a paragraph about how I would be a great consultant so I can go do some consultant work on the side? And I still think that would have been a good way to make money. Doing consultancy work, but I wasn't super excited about it. And just as I started to knock on doors as a consultant, the YouTube channel took off and I'm like, forget that, I'll go do this because YouTube's more fun. I think we underestimate just how much time there is in a day. Like everyone's always whining, there's not enough time in the day. There's not enough time. Are you freaking kidding me? There's so much freaking time in the day. It's just, where are you using it?
Yeah.
And I've always found that the coolest thing about distance running is it is an excuse to recapture an hour or two of your day. And you can use it for, joking around with your friends. And trust me, I did a lot of that. But towards my 30s, I really started loving those runs as my hour or two to be alone in my head. And the synapses fire so much better when you're exercising and you're out on this beautiful trail. And if I channeled that energy towards thinking of ways to make money, like, I mean, I could come up with 100 ideas in an hour-long run, you know? So for anyone out there that's saying, I don't have enough time, or I love Nick talking about this lifestyle that he's living, just find an hour. And it doesn't have to be running. It could be out just walking or meditating. Find half an hour, and just dedicate that time towards creating the lifestyle that you want to live. And that doesn't have to be as an entrepreneur, but if your goal is to be an entrepreneur, spend that hour in your head saying, how do I get from here to there? And you dedicate an hour a day towards anything every single day, you're going to get pretty darn good at it, whatever that is.
Absolutely. I mean, we can both relate to that as well. I mean, a lot of lately, especially because we both obviously work, 9 to 5, like we have jobs where we're very committed to it during the day. And then this is, a side thing, building out, a community website, et cetera. And so a lot of times our meetings where we actually get to talk about what we're doing on the side is on a run.
On your run,
We'll go for a run together, and we'll talk about, what are some ideas for videos, for the website? What are we gonna work on? So
yeah,
we can definitely relate to that 100%
for sure.
Well, and it's prioritizing things, right? Like
exactly.
If your priority is playing video games, it's going to be really hard to build out a business.
Definitely.
If your priority is building out a business, it's going to be really hard to play video games. So nothing against video games. Like I never try to tell people how they should live their life. I'm like, but be authentic with what it is that you want to create. Exactly, if you want to be the best video gamer, hell yeah, but make sure you're pushing everything aside so you can be the best video gamer. Similarly, my aspiration was to have just a killer cash flow from a couple different businesses. Mm-hmm. And I pushed a lot of things to the side to make sure that I could create those things.
Absolutely. Well, I think we should probably transition now, considering that this is the Beer Mile podcast.
Yeah, let's talk Beer Mile.
BeerMile.com. To kick things off, we're curious, how did you first hear about the Beer Mile? What was your first Beer Mile? How did it the buzz hit you, I guess, and what got you involved in it to go for that world record attempt in 2012 where you set the American record?
It's so cool to see you guys getting hyped about the Beer Mile. How old are you guys, by the way?
28, 24.
Okay, they're of legal drinking age, everybody.
Yes.
But more importantly, you guys are, about 10 years younger than me. And what's happened to the Beer Mile in the last, let's call it since 2012 or so, the last 8 years, is this awesome embrace of it from a mainstream culture standpoint. But for our younger listeners, when we were kids, like when I was in college, the Beer Mile was just something that no one had ever heard of except like in college circles, because at the end of a long cross country season or a track season, you'd run a Beer Mile as a way to blow off steam, and it was like kind of like an annual tradition. We're going to circle the cars up at the track and we're going to run this Beer Mile and it's going to be awesome. And that's all it ever was. Right. And then I'm not going to take full credit for this, but I just thought it would be an awesome PR stunt if I did it right after the Olympic Games, right? Like the fittest I've ever been was 2012. I just finished 5th in the Olympic Games. And I'm like, I know what I'm going to do to celebrate. I'm going to go do a Beer Mile because my personal best was like, 6 something that I'd ran in college. And I'm like, I'm a freaking sub 4 minute miler. What could I actually do? So like we made this like stunt that I was going to train for it and then go do it. And I made a video, and I actually had a friend at TMZ that said they'd run with it. So I'm like, all the pieces for a great PR stunt fell into place. I just flown back from London. I was thirsty on a hot summer day here in Oregon. So we went out to local track and I ran 5:19, which at the time, according to beermile.com, the Bible of the sport, put me number 1, the fastest American to ever do it. Now, subsequently, we've seen this, arms race between the runners and the drinkers getting down to, what is it now, 4:17 or something, 4:35. Where is it at right now?
The official world record is 4:33.
4:33.
And the guy who ran 4:33 actually did run 4:24.
Wow.
But it was at an official competition, and he had just slightly too much leftover beer.
Yeah.
So
that's what I love is like, it's legitimate. There's rules to this. Like if there was leftover beer, in college, we'd all laugh and be like, give him a penalty beer. And you laugh. And like, it wasn't so serious, but I kind of get a kick out of how serious everyone takes it now. And, I was in a fraternity in college. So like chugging beer is nothing new to me. And obviously I was running a lot. So it kind of all came together as this great PR stunt. And then, it just kind of scaled from there as Flow Track got excited about it. And people always ask me, hey, will you come participate in our beer mile? I'm like, that ship has sailed for me. Like, I love them still, but it just hurts. It's like a unique pain for sure. And it's a unique buzz, a really fun buzz. I'll add, but don't try it unless you're 20. Unless you're 21 and you have a DD, do not attempt a beer mile. And even then, you should probably think about it.
Absolutely. So we got a few listener questions ahead of this, and someone actually wanted to know, will there ever be another Nick Symmonds beer mile, or is that ship totally sailed at this point?
I wouldn't say it's totally sailed. It's just probably not on like my top, 20 list of things to do. However, if I got invited and I just couldn't say no, like I'm not opposed to doing the event. I know I can never run 5:19 again. So the time incentive isn't there. Mm-hmm. And if I'm going to drink 4 beers, I don't need an excuse to do it. Like we could sit down and drink 4 beers and I can do it as fast as you want, if that's like the goal. So I guess I don't need it. I don't need an incentive to run and I don't need an incentive to drink. So like we can do that without the pain potentially.
Absolutely. Give your total honest opinion here. Do you think the sport of the beer mile in and of itself, I guess, has any more potential to run? Or do you think at this point, the media buzz around it has kind of already had its limelight? And at this point, like you said, it is kind of an arms race for that fastest time. Yeah. And it's less of a novelty at this point. So curious on your honest opinion, is there something there to actually grow this into a bigger sport or beyond just, the beer mile, kind of, as we alluded to very early on, just the overall atmosphere of it? What's your take on that going forward?
What you saw was the first wave of it. And I think that it peaked and now it's in a little bit of a trough because you're not seeing it as much. But what you saw was the first wave. And a lot of things that are massive today went through an initial wave and then a big bust. I actually was watching a documentary on skateboarding the other day. Everyone thinks that skateboarding just went from zero to like mainstream overnight. Skateboarding went really like popular initially and then it faded out and everyone thought it was like the hula hoop. And like for a few years there, like nobody skateboarded. Even though everyone knew what skateboarding was, no one skateboarded. And then I think it was the introduction of the urethane wheel that kind of brought everybody back. So I don't think beer miling is dead. I just think in order for it to go from like, kind of gimmicky niche thing to mainstream is going to be somebody who understands the business of it. Like, how are we going to make a business out of this so that it's not just like people goofing around at their local track or flow track making a video of it? Like, what are we going to do? What takes beer mile to that mainstream level? I mean, Color Run's a good example. Color Run's super silly. Yeah. I mean, all of these little like silly gimmicky 5Ks, like they had somebody that understood the way to monetize it and build it out. So I think that there's potential for beer mile to be built out and to be a self-sustaining business like that. But you need an entrepreneur that just gets really excited and is unrelenting about building out that business model.
What are your thoughts about being, I guess, maybe a part of that, coming back to the sport as a commentator, say on a world championship race? Is that something you could ever see yourself doing?
Yeah. I mean, I've got a lot of, unique knowledge about the running and the drinking of the beer mile. So I love commentating. If you watch my YouTube videos, like I do a lot of commentating for my own videos.
Exactly.
So I get a kick out of that. I just have one rule when it comes to commentating. You can't muzzle me. Because I actually did commentating for NBC and they kept muzzling me. They're like, you can't say that. I'm like, well, he did do drugs. Like he's a convicted doper. They're like, but you can't say that. I'm like, well, why am I even here then? So again, another reason why you see me on YouTube and not commentating for NBC, I don't have to censor myself on YouTube, and so that's my hard and fast rule when it comes to commentating. I'm going to call it like I see it. And if you're not okay with that, then I'll go make another YouTube video.
How is that kind of, I guess it's on a different thread, but like, how is that transpired between being a pro runner, obviously using that as your own advocacy, and now being an entrepreneur? Like, how do you use your own business as your platform to speak out on stuff like that?
That's a really good question. I think when I was a pro runner, well, first of all, I don't feel like I've ever really answered to anybody, right? So even though I was sponsored by Nike, I didn't feel like I answered to Nike. So that gave me a ton of freedom to kind of do what I want and say what I want. Like when you're an employee and your employer's, reading your tweets at the end of the day, you kind of answer to somebody, you don't want to piss off your boss. So I've had a certain sense of freedom to kind of speak my mind that I recognize as a huge privilege that not everybody has that. And oddly enough, as I've grown as an entrepreneur and have, more businesses and more responsibility and now employees and a wife, and it's almost that I don't answer to anyone directly, but I answer to a lot of people in that I want them to be proud of me and I want to, not piss people off. So in some ways I've kind of quieted down or muzzled myself a little bit, because I do have a team of employees here and I want them to feel that this is a safe place. So my political views, even though they are, I feel very strongly about them, I don't want to run around shouting them from the rooftops, because what if I have an employee that feels, differently, and they feel that they can't be themselves here because they're worried about offending me or something, So I think in some ways I've actually kind of quieted down a little bit on that front, more out of a sense of respect for other people's feelings and their own opinions.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I guess circling off on the kind of the beer mile topic, a couple other questions that some listeners had coming in. So quick one, what's your favorite beer? I guess both beer mile and also just in general, if you were to grab a beer on a Saturday afternoon, what's your go-to?
If you go into my garage right now, I have a fridge dedicated to beer, and there are dozens of varieties. So I don't even know if I can answer that question because they're just so different, right? Like, it's a hot summer day, I want a Kolsch, or it's a cold winter, afternoon and I'm reaching for an IPA. I just love them all. I literally, there's not a beer that I don't like. So, but for beer miling, this is not a question of taste. This is a question of performance.
Right.
And I think that the votes in that Bud Platinum is really the way to go, right? Because you can drink a beer out of a bottle faster. If bottles are allowed, then you can drain it out of a bottle if you know how to drink from, tip it just right. And Bud Platinum is so light, but still reaches the ABV requirements. So I think that if you're gonna watch an elite beer miler, are they still using Bud Platinum? I have to imagine there's not a better.
I think most of the records are in Bud.
Yeah, Bud Platinum's very common. I personally use Blue Moon, but nobody else really does. So
what does Corey use?
The Canadians, a lot of the Canadians will use
Molson.
Amsterdam Blonde.
Yeah.
Actually.
Oh, okay.
And then I think Corey Belmore, the world record holder, uses Kingfisher.
Okay.
Some sort of lager.
Here's maybe what really put the nail in the coffin for me on beer miling. When I did the Flow Track, world record, World Series of beer miling or whatever they called it, World Championships of beer miling, they had a beer sponsor, and this sponsor brewed a special ale for the event. And I think I was the only one under contract that was required to use the micro brew beer.
Everything makes sense now.
Yeah, so everybody's drinking like Bud Platinum, and I'm drinking this. It was a pale ale, but it was like very frothy and kind of like an IPA. And it was trust me, like if I'm buying beer, that's the beer I'm buying. It was delicious,
right?
But the exact wrong beer for beer mile.
Beer mile.
Yeah, so I got my butt. That
makes a lot of sense now. Okay.
I got my butt kicked in that event, but I probably got paid better than anybody.
Well, definitely paid better than anybody.
Yeah. I mean, that was kind of my introduction to beer miling, before I had done it, but the first time I heard about it was I followed Flow Track in high school because they were one of the first, major news outlets for running besides Let's Run. And they hosted that Beer Mile World Championship. And so I remember, streaming that live, and it was like a big deal. I was super stoked to see it. And I remember Bud Light Platinum kind of being the thing.
Yeah.
And I knew you had run 5:19 before that and went there. But from the camera, you couldn't really tell. It wasn't super good quality. It was at that racetrack. It was dark. So the quality wasn't like amazing from a film standpoint. So you couldn't really tell what everyone was drinking. And so, that makes a lot more sense. I remember watching your post-race interview, and you mentioned like the amount of carbonation and everything else in that. So it's all adding up now for sure.
Yeah. No, but I mean, again, like the point of that was entertainment, and
absolutely
having me there as kind of the actual pro amongst everybody else. I understood my role there, and I also, for better or for worse, I've always understood like where the money comes from for things like this. Like that event wouldn't have happened without the brewery putting the money behind it.
Right.
And so we need to make sure we shout that brewery out. And so that was what my job was there. If I was there and there was just prize money, I'm probably just going to race for the prize money. But
exactly.
I just love doing brand deals. Like you guys probably see me doing this, and maybe I do them too often sometimes, but like a company like Bose calls up, and you know how long I've loved this company, Bose. Like I've used Bose products for 20 years now. I probably own a dozen of them. Like here's one right now, just right in front of me.
Right.
And you know, I use them in every aspect of my life, from my running headphones to these new sunglasses that they have with headphones built in, to my aviation headsets. Bose. This brand calls up and they say they want to work with me, and it's like going back to that roller coaster. Do you know how exciting it is to look into your email and see, oh my God, Bose wants to do a deal with us?
Right.
You know, so I really am selective with the brands I work with, and I really try to pick brands that just get me so excited. Like I almost pinch myself. Like, I can't believe this company wants to work with me. Gymshark was another one.
Yeah.
But for every Gymshark and Bose you see me promoting, I promise you there are 25 companies that I'm like, that's not happening. It's not a fit, or it's just not a product that I would use.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what a good example is of that. I get approached by massage guns.
Oh,
like
yeah.
You know, like these Theragun type things, and nothing against them. I don't use them that much.
Yeah.
So
Right.
like, and unless I find like that I start using that product religiously, and I can actually say like, damn, this is a good product, like I'm probably not going to pitch it much.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's so easy to like stay to your true self and use that as a gauge. Like for Bose as an example. Yeah. Like I probably haven't used, besides the shitty original AirPods, like I haven't used
any other brand.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, they are the, you know, Cadillac or the Ferrari of audio. And so it's just so easy to pitch a product that you're using every single day, and a product that you know people are going to like. Like Nike was like that. Brooks running shoes was like that. Like if I look at somebody and I said, like, this is the greatest running shoe I've ever used. With Brooks, I could say that because they made a couple of shoes that to this day I think were some of the best shoes ever made. And so anytime you're in like that top pinnacle of that category, it's just a super easy sell.
Definitely. Yeah, that actually, two things come to mind, but I'm going to ask one at a time. First of all, so I know Brooks, they actually put out a beer mile racing flat for Lewis Kent a few years back.
Oh, that's cool.
Do you think Brooks, you know, from you working with them, kind of your sense of their vibe, do you think that's something that they would ever be interested again, you know, being a part of like the beer mile sport? And I guess they're kind of a part of some of those niche categories. Do you see that? That's kind of just a part of their culture is what I'm gathering.
Of all the brands that I can think of, they jump to my mind first because they are fun. Like they like fun, quirky things. They're not afraid to take chances. You know, I liked working with Brooks because there was nothing I could pitch them that was too crazy. Like if I wanted to pitch something to Nike, just getting someone to take a meeting with me was hard. Whereas with Brooks, I'd say, hey, I want to pitch you guys an idea. And I'd immediately have the CEO and the CMO in a room the next day. Like that's really cool. And nothing I said was too crazy. So I loved that about Brooks. But I don't know. Again, anytime you're pitching to anybody anything, show them how they're going to make money. Right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
If you guys can say, hey, this is how I'm going to make you guys a ton of money, then it's a no-brainer for everybody.
Definitely. And the other thing that I thought of as we were talking about all of this, for the aspiring entrepreneur or someone who wants a little more inside information, and if you don't want to answer this, totally fine. What's the rough makeup, I guess, from a monetary standpoint between endorsement deals like representing Bose, YouTube ads, YouTube content, and also, you know, being the CEO of a startup that's growing beyond a startup? What's from your career standpoint, you know, kind of which of those areas are you seeing the most success monetarily, and I guess also just from a you know, fun standpoint as well, you know, interest level standpoint?
It's a great question. So I'll just break it down for you in that anytime I'm wearing my hat, it's two different hats, right? On one side, I'm the CEO of Run Gum, and I'm actually an employee of Run Gum. So yes, I'm the co-founder. Yes, I'm a board member, but you know, I get a W-2 from Gold Medal Inc. It's just our business, and I am an employee, and I could be fired from this, right? So that's one side of that cash flow, or that entity as an entrepreneur. On the other hand, you've got Nick Symmonds LLC, and that is really my content creation side. So YouTube ad revenue, brand deals, all go through that business, and I own 100% of that. I cannot be fired. I can do whatever I want. So they're very different. Nick Symmonds LLC is great for a cash flow standpoint, right? if I want more money, I just create a new product or do a new brand deal. Like I can, make money as hard as I want to work with as a content creator with Nick Symmonds LLC. I love it for that. However, and this is where a lot of, I think, content creators get it wrong. You can't sell that, right? Like I am attached to that and I can't sell myself. So, there's no real long-term play as a content creator unless you're creating something like a business that can ultimately be sold. So the Run Gum side of things, though it doesn't pay as well as the content creation side of things from a cash flow standpoint, it is so much more valuable on paper when you're looking at your asset sheet, because the value of my stock in Gold Medal Inc., it would take years and years or potentially decades to make that as a content creator.
Yeah.
One day Run Gum will be acquired and I'll cash that out. I wouldn't do it any other way. I really, really think that you need, or a good entrepreneur should have both, or the dream scenario is to have both, because you have the phenomenal cash flow. Like I bought an airplane, right? And it's expensive. And my cash flow from my job as CEO of Run Gum probably couldn't pay for that. But if I needed more money, I'd just go do another brand deal and I could pay off, the airplane loan or add a GPS unit to it or whatever I needed in the short term. But I know that for my family's, security long term, I want to be building something that I can eventually sell. And that is, my shares in Run Gum. So I will probably always have both. And the wonderful thing about being an entrepreneur in the 21st century is those two things prop each other up.
Definitely. Yeah. Especially with promotions, etc.
Yeah.
Two questions. One, initially just about getting your pilot's license. Like, how many hours of flight time do you need to do that?
So the FAA dictates that you need 40 hours of flight time before you can take your check ride and actually get your license. Almost always it's going to come in longer than that. I had about 55 hours of flight time. Which is pretty common, for a guy who didn't grow up in an aviation family, and literally I had never flown a minute before I started my training. So 55 hours for me. There's a lot, hundreds more of ground school that you're going to need to do, whether it's with an instructor. I wouldn't recommend that, but there's so many online courses. I watched hundreds of hours of YouTube videos and, hundreds of hours of just digging into online course material. It was fun. Like I hadn't been a student since I graduated in 2006. So to go back and really dig in and use my brain on something that had been a goal of mine for a very long time, it was one of the most rewarding things I've ever done.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and that's one of the things I always balance is like, all right, well, fuel costs this much.
Don't even get started on the cost of it, man. So like, people ask me a lot, like, don't play those games. You can't play those games, or it gets. I mean it, like from like a cash flow standpoint, like don't do it because it's too expensive. So when people say, hey, I'm so-and-so, I'm this age, and I've always wanted to be a pilot, like what's the number one thing you'd recommend? I'd say save up. So it's going to cost you between $10,000 and $15,000 to get your pilot's license. And I would err on the high end of that, because if it takes you longer, it's going to cost more. Mm-hmm. So save up every single penny you need and then begin your training. Because the worst thing you can do in your training is, I'm training. Oh, I've run out of money. Now I need to take a couple months off to save up more. And now I'm training. You'll take 2 steps forward and 1 step back if you're doing that. So if you really want to become a pilot and you want to do it the most efficient and cost-effective way you can, you'll need to save up all the money that you're going to need to get from zero to hero. And just don't even look at it. Like once that money's saved, that money doesn't exist for anything other than getting its license. It's not for groceries. It's not for paying rent. It is in this pool, and it can only be spent on getting your pilot's license, and it has to be spent on getting your pilot's license. And you don't even think about the fact that gasoline costs $5, that low level 100 low lead costs $5 a gallon. Doesn't matter, because it's already been set aside for that.
Love it.
Number 2 question, you mentioned acquisitions. So I guess this is like actually 2 and 3. Do you have any, businesses on the horizon that you'd be looking at for an acquisition? And then also, what do you think is next for you? Obviously, you're a serial entrepreneur. What do you think after Run Gum? Because there is life after Run Gum. What do you think is next for you?
I'm not that old, yeah.
Right.
So about the acquisition, my business partner, who was my coach, Sam LaPre, and we started this in 2014, 50-50 partners, self-funded. And, when you start a business, it's a lot like, kind of getting into a marriage, because there's only two ways this marriage ends. Either like we go all the way and we get acquired, which would, be the end goal of any entrepreneur that starts a company, or you have an IPO, but you have an exit. Or, you have a bankruptcy, a big breakup. And we've been able to navigate the waters. There were some freaking crazy moments, especially in 2020, that we were able to get through. And our thought process through all of it, we never said, oh, we have to exit at this multiple, or we have to sell for this much. It was always like, let's just keep doing this until we get an offer we can't say no to. And, this is I haven't said this in any other podcast, so here's a little exclusive nugget. We've been getting unsolicited offers to buy Run Gum. And so I'm entertaining offers. I'm not saying that I want to sell. I'm not saying that we're going to sell, but it's cool that we've built something that people are starting to say like, hey, would you ever consider selling? Once we've sold, and once I'm no longer the CEO of Run Gum, I'm just going to do the exact same thing. So my goal as an entrepreneur, some people's goal as an entrepreneur is to change the world. And I love these people. Like Elon Musk, he's not in it for the money. I think the money is important, but he's in it to literally change the world. That's what gets him out of bed in the morning. And I think there's some entrepreneurs that wake up and are in it to see just how much money they possibly can make. And I'm not that entrepreneur either. I'm probably too lazy to be that entrepreneur. My mantra as an entrepreneur has always been, how can I make the most amount of money, but also keep the fun at a 10 out of 10? So I would rather make 1/10 the amount of money, but I'm just having so much freaking fun doing it, than make 10 times the amount of money and be miserable. I don't need that much money. I live in Springfield, Oregon. It's not that expensive to live here. I have no aspirations of ever leaving Springfield, Oregon. So my goal is to make enough money to do all the cool things that I want to do, and my family to do all the cool things they want to do, but have the most fun doing it. And for me, that really comes in the first few years of a startup. Idea to creation to launch to those first few years of scaling, there's no way to have more fun in business, I don't think. But then you get to like the really scaling a business, right? Taking it from, let's say 10 million to 100 million. That just sounds like a lot of work. But to some people, that's the kind of stuff that they love to do.
Right.
So I think what'll happen is Run Gum will get acquired, and somebody who has the fun doing that kind of work will scale the company. And I'll just create another business from scratch and try to scale it up and sell it. And then I'll do it again and do it again, do it again. The cool thing about being able to do that is you carry a lot of the knowledge and the assets with you. So whereas I was a tiny little influencer with zero knowledge when we launched Run Gum, now I'm a content creator with hundreds of thousands of subscribers who really knows how to launch and ultimately I will know how to exit a business. So it should cut that learning curve down in half. And then it just gets easier and easier as you go.
Absolutely. And if you go on a run, you can come up with 100 more ideas, as you mentioned earlier.
Well, that's the limitation right now. Yeah, it's never a limitation of ideas. For me, it's sifting through those ideas and saying, what has that sweet spot? It's like some of them are literally like billion-dollar ideas, but the amount of work to get that business to work is just, I don't want to do it.
Exactly.
And some of them are like, like just really tiny little ideas, but they're not enough. They're not big enough to get my excitement level up to be fun. So I'm trying to find that sweet spot of how do I build a kick-ass business that is super, super fun, but also big enough to get excited. And if it can give back or change the world in some way, that's like icing on the cake for me. So with Run Gum, I think we kind of hit that sweet spot where it's not a hard business. It's not a complicated business. Like if you looked at the moving pieces, it's a pretty simple business to figure out. It's fun because it's not too big, and we're creating content that inspires people. We're creating a fun product that helps people. So like it kind of ticks all the boxes for me. The only time where Run Gum would get, not hitting all those bases for me is when it gets so big that it becomes very complicated or, just kind of like just a little bit of that grind in the scaling process.
Absolutely.
But there's some people that are really good at doing that, and I can either let them do it entirely by themselves, or I can help them out while they take on the lion's share of that task. But for me, I am a content creator, a marketer, a PR person at heart, and the logistics side of things I'm not good at. Like I'm not, that's not my specialty. So someone either needs to be hired or needs to step in and do that role for us. So we've done a good job to this point. I just think probably now we're getting to the point where this is becoming a pretty big beast.
Yeah, like, I mean, you got picked up by Walmart recently.
Yeah, and just like the logistics of taking a small DTC company to being in every single Walmart in the United States.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean, you should have seen us in October. What was it? October of last year. I mean, I was working like 12+ hour days, and I'd come home and just like crash on the couch, and I'd call my business partner. I'm like, we need to hire more people. We need more money. This is insane. You know, and that is what you want, but you want that every single day. And I'm just not, I don't thrive in that scenario.
All right.
Awesome. Well, in the interest of time, we don't want to hold you for too long. We have 2 final things that we want to talk about. The last one is going to be kind of a funny little scenario for you, but first, so we, as kind of a way to grow audience and content, kind of similar to yourself, we've been trying some challenges kind of related to beer mile variations, et cetera. For example, we did in Ben and Jerry's pint mile where we ate 4 pints of ice cream and
are you serious?
So we've been trying some random stuff. So obviously you've done some crazy, world records, official, unofficial. You've done some crazy challenges. Obviously you have big fitness goals as well. So kind of talk about a little bit, what are some of those challenges that you've done that you would absolutely never do again, as well as maybe what are some challenges you would recommend for us to go after, even if it was something that you were like, I'm not going to do it. That sounds disgusting. That sounds terrible. I mean, challenge us and we'll take it on.
Worst physical challenge I've ever done. Will never do again. Like just horrible. It's my Big Mac mile.
So we watched that today.
Yeah. Four Big Macs, right? You eat a Big Mac, you run a lap, you do it 4 times. It's the Big Mac mile. That video I think it's got like 700,000 views. So it was a very good video, good concept, well executed. I brought in a couple of my buddies to help out. I've never been so sick. Like, here's the thing. I thought it'd be super easy. Like, you eat 4 Big Macs and you're on a mile, you're going to puke, right?
Yep.
No, because this stuff turns into absolute cement in your stomach. No matter how hard I tried to puke or how much water I drank, I couldn't get the burgers out. So you would dry heave and like maybe a little water would come back up, but you've got 4 Big Macs just rotting in your stomach.
Oh man.
I even went down to the local pharmacy and tried to buy Epicac to try to make myself throw up.
Okay.
And they didn't have it. Like they don't sell Epicac anymore. So I called poison control and I was like, yeah, I need to make myself throw up, but I can't find Epicac. Like, what do I do? And they go, sir, what did you ingest? I said, I had 4 Big Macs. And they're just kind of like quiet on the other line. And they're like, are you serious? I'm like, yes. And I need to throw up. They were not amused at all. So if you guys want to tackle that, be my guest. But
that's good. That's good.
Other challenges that could be fun. Like you saw me do the dribbling a basketball 1 mile.
Yeah.
And that was one of my first like pretty viral hits on YouTube. And everybody's done it subsequently. Like, I think everybody and their dog has done this, but it's a fun one, right? It's low barrier. It's easy. It's funny. Like anyone can do it. So like that was a real hit. Here's a challenge, and I do this with you guys sometime. I've always wanted to do it. I'm like a little too nervous for the blowback from it. I always thought a whiskey 400 would be fun because I freaking love whiskey. So you put a shot of whiskey every 100 meters, and it's more of like a sprinting event. So you like sprint, do a shot, sprint, do a shot, and you do 4 shots of whiskey in probably under 2 minutes. I mean, that would be a freaking party. But, then all of a sudden, some kid tries it and dies because that's a lot of whiskey. So I probably wouldn't do that from like a publicity standpoint or like on YouTube, but I think that it would just be a great party.
We might have to fly out to do that. What's your whiskey of choice for that?
Again, kind of like with the beer, I like it all. But if how I used to hate whiskey. Like when I was in my 20s, I just thought it was firewater. It was so nasty. And then in my mid 30s, I kind of got like more into whiskey. And they always say there's one whiskey that is like that kind of moment where you're like, oh my God, this is awesome. Mm-hmm. And then that's like your gateway drug into whiskeys.
Yeah.
I remember mine like crystal clear, and it's Eagle Rare. If you've ever had it, Eagle Rare whiskey, something about that, just like I had it and I'm like, holy cow, I get it. And then that's still my go-to. Like I've had maybe over 100 some whiskeys in my life, and I love them all for different reasons, but nothing will ever be quite as good to me as Eagle Rare.
Excellent. Excellent. So have there been any other challenges besides that you were like, this is whatever, too disgusting, too crazy. Like I will never do this, because especially now that you're even more in the limelight than you were in the past. And so, you have a young audience too. So like, is there anything that you're like, we shouldn't do this, it's too raunchy, but it'd be good for someone who doesn't care about the debauchery of it?
So I've got my YouTube board. I'm looking at it right now. And
okay.
I've got probably 50 different ideas up there. And so I'm just, for people who can't see the video, I'm looking through this at like some of the better ideas we've had. Now, some of these were just really, really good ideas at the time. And then like they didn't age well. So world record high fives in 60 seconds, which it's only like, I think it's only like 100. I'm like, this will be the best video ever. I'll like line up 1,000 people on the inside of a track and I'll sprint a 60-second quarter and high five them all, which is an awesome video.
Yeah.
Except for COVID.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden I'm like seen as this like pariah that's like a super spreader giving high fives to everybody. So like one day I will do that video, but you can't do it in 2020.
Yep.
So let me see, what else have I got?
The YouTube board is a good idea.
That is a good idea.
I'd show it to you guys, but it's too good. Like, here's one I'd really like to do with like just some A+ YouTubers. And like, I'm not there yet, but like once I get big enough, I want to start inviting some YouTubers to do some of my crazy ideas. I want to do a tuxedo mile, but like you have to be dressed in a full tuxedo with the shoes and the cummerbund and everything. But if you got like big YouTubers, Trahan, Danny Duncan, Mark Rober, maybe we get Mr. Beast out there. Can you imagine seeing all these guys in a tuxedo running a mile? It would be so funny.
That would be.
So I'm saving that one for some of my YouTuber buddies. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, you can create these things out of like scratch. Like I did the Travis Scott mile the other day just because the Travis Scott meal was trending. Yep. But like, this is another example where if I go out for a 60-minute run and I devote all 60 minutes towards creative, I will come back with 25 ideas. And then it's just a matter of sifting through them with my videographer and saying like, okay, which of these can we actually get done? Which of these logistically are just too hard, or maybe, not PC enough. And we'll distill a list of 20 ideas down into maybe like the top 3 or 4, and then we'll go shoot them.
Awesome. Well, listeners are hearing it here first, that there's plenty more content to come.
Yeah. So along those lines, this is where I found my real success with YouTube. I started it in 2017 and I was just doing a shotgun approach, trying all kinds of different things. And I wasn't really getting a lot of traction. And it was so discouraging. I took 6 months off, but I knew I wanted to be a successful YouTuber. Like all my heroes were like kid YouTubers. And I'm like, I want to be a YouTuber so bad, which is funny because I'm like a 35-year-old guy. But I just said to myself, all right, I'm on January 1, 2018, I made a promise to myself. I looked at myself in the mirror and said, you are going to make one video a week, every single week. You're going to try to make it the best video you can. But the rule is you have to put out a video every single week. And I knew if I did that, again, like I said, if you devote an hour every single day towards something, you're going to get good at it. Right. If you commit to doing one thing every single week, like make a YouTube video every single week, at some point you're going to get good at it. It's impossible not to if you never stop. And so, they weren't great videos, but we had a little bit of success here, a little blip there. And then one day it kind of all clicked in my brain and I just knew what kind of videos we were going to make. And I had the videographer that could make the videos. And I'm not joking. Like we went from pretty flat to like exponential growth. In fact, this time last year, I only had 30,000 subscribers and I'm closing in on 300,000 subs to, we'll close in on it before the end of the year. So like you just through the process of being consistent and honing your skill day in and day out or week in and week out, you are going to get good at it. Now, whether you become Mr. Beast or not, that takes a little bit of luck and a little bit of like special sauce. But I really feel that in anything that you do, if you just don't stop, it's impossible not to get good at something.
Exactly. And taking those big ambitions and that vision and breaking it down into just what do I need to do today, tomorrow, next week, and just getting there over time. And
the promise to yourself, right? Yeah. Like when I make a promise to myself, like it's as serious or more serious than if I make a promise to anyone else. Mm-hmm. Maybe my wife's an exception, but if I look myself in a mirror And if I write this thing down, like I've got my goal board here, and if it makes it onto the goal board, it's like me just making a promise to my future self that no matter what it takes, future self has to make it happen. So I'm gonna here's another world first for you guys. On December 31st, I'll set my goals for the year, right? And I already know what I want my big audacious goal for 2021 to be. And I am going to get to 1 million subscribers in 2021. And it's not a question of like whether I do it or not. It's just simply a question of how much time and energy and resources do I want to like allocate to it.
Right.
But if I write it down on a sheet of paper, the promise to myself and the commitment that I'm making to myself to allocate the time and the resources to that, it becomes something that's like an unbreakable bond with my own self. So like I'm nervous to say it, and I'm nervous to put it on paper because like the amount of commitment that I'm making to myself to make it happen then becomes like very serious. So if someone's out there and you guys have a big audacious goal, you know, whatever that audacious goal is, I'm encouraging you to, one, write it down, because you then become 42% more likely to achieve it. 2, tell somebody about it, because that doubles your chances of actually achieving it too. And then 3, just recognize how powerful it is to have that goal, to have told those people, and what it will take, right? You know, if your goal is to run a sub 4-minute mile, like, one, make sure it's realistic. Like if you're a 6-minute mile, that might not be realistic, but like understand the amount, or let's say something that anyone can do, finish a marathon. It's a very, very realistic goal to say, I want to run a marathon in 2021. But damn it, you're going to have to devote an enormous amount of time and energy and focus to make that a reality. So do not look yourself in a mirror and say that that's your goal unless you're prepared to do the work to actually realize it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great message. And I think with a closing scenario, should we introduce something a little bit fun at the end for closing out? So we want to do a little scenario with you. This is kind of a random debate that for whatever reason comes up. So say you're in college, you are, out at a frat party at some party, maybe had a few beverages throughout the night. Something happens. The cops are chasing you at 2 a.m. How fast can you run that 100 meters to get away?
I used to have dreams of this. Like, you know how, like,
I'm glad I'm not the only one.
when you're out logging those miles and you're like, I'd give anything for a party to be busted. Like, let me just show you how fast I can run. And this actually happened to somebody. Do you guys know who Xavier Carter is?
Yes. Yeah. Actually,
so Xavier was a world like caliber. He was like who is he? Before Bolt was big. I mean, like, Xavier Carter was the biggest name in sprinting, and he had this massive contract with Nike. But the guy liked to party a little bit.
Okay.
And I think you'll have to double check me on this one, but I think he was out partying and he jumped a fence and he tried to run away from the cop, and the cop caught him. And the joke that everyone was putting online was like, get that cop a shoe contract.
Yes,
that's the fastest cop in the world, right?
For real.
So reality is, and especially today, I couldn't run that fast to get away from that police officer. But man, yeah, back in my prime, I could have dropped, a 23-second something on him. But how many drinks have you had too? Because you're like swerving and you're gonna get in the car. Guys, don't run away from the police. Anyone listening, just don't drink unless you're 21. And if you're over 21, then you're not gonna get in trouble because you're of age. And just thank the police officers for all that they do. Especially in this crazy world of 2020. I just, anyone out there in law enforcement or first responders, thank God we have you guys, like, keeping us safe.
Absolutely.
So appreciate all the work that our cops and our first responders do out there.
Somebody's got to keep us sane.
Definitely. Yeah. No, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up. Anything else that you want to mention, plug, feel free to speak to the audience, whatever you want to mention right now.
If you like energy, you got rungum.com or Walmart or Target in the sporting goods aisle. For me, I think what I get most excited about in the morning, one of the things I love most about running is that I felt so blessed as 12 years as a pro. I would have done it for free. Like, I loved it that much. I had done it for free. And now I feel that with YouTubing, I found that lightning has struck twice. I would do it for free. And anybody out there that wants to see me in my element, check out my YouTube channel, because like I'm just having so much fun making these videos. I would do it for free. And if I can leave your listeners with one parting piece of advice, if you can find a way to make money doing something that you would do for free, you are the luckiest person in the world, because maybe like less than 0.1% of us get to do that. And I encourage anyone out there that should be the holy grail of your existence, is find a way to wake up every morning, do something you love immensely, and somehow get paid to do it. Like you're going to be the happiest person in the world.
That's a great closing advice. That's what, we're trying to do ourselves. So we appreciate that.
Hey, it took me a long time to get there though. Well, with running, I got lucky, right? But with regards to YouTube, there were a couple of years there where I was, grinding. I didn't look forward to coming into work, and I just knew I was going to be on this endless search to find something that I loved as much as I loved running. And for me, it's YouTube, which is so weird because I feel so old compared to most YouTubers. Tell me I'm not that old, guys.
You're not that old. You're not that old.
How old's Mark Rober? He's got to be around my age. He's really good. He's my favorite YouTuber, by the way. I'll go on record saying that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick. Thanks for joining. We'll cut it there, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
awesome. Thanks, guys.
We fly out to do some various challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to hook up for some challenges once we can actually, fly out there and travel again. Yeah, that'd be a blast. We really enjoyed that interview with Nick. And now, as we always do in the podcast episode, if you're still here hanging around, we know you're a true fan. We really appreciate you. You're the best. You're the MVP. Our last segment, we got to include it because we include it in other ones. The beer of the week. We didn't want to take away from Nick earlier in the episode. We wanted to dive right in, but now we got to talk about this beer because this beer is, in my opinion, the best beer we've had on the podcast so far. Certainly. As the beer of the week.
Certainly.
So what are we drinking this week?
We are drinking Tank 7 from Boulevard Brewing Company out of, is it Kansas City, Missouri, or KCK?
Oh, I think it's KCK.
Either way, either state, great brewing company. Tank 7, only second to their Boulevard Wheat, but my personal opinion, I enjoyed Tank 7 more.
Agreed. Tank 7, if you have not heard of it, it is Saison Ale, and it is, let me just fact check myself, it's 8.5% alcohol by volume.
Sounds about
38
right.
IBUs. So, it is definitely a higher ABV beer, but it does not taste like it's a higher ABV beer, in my opinion.
No. Yeah, Tank 7 is really interesting because Saisons usually are like, I feel like they're like 6, maybe 6.5. But this, if you have like 3 of them, you're where you need to be for the night. So it's very easy just to have like a 4-pack of Tall Boys. And that's it. You're spending $6, you're having great tasting beer, and you're where you need to be.
Definitely. I had this for the first time visiting a friend in Kansas City, and ever since then, it's definitely been one of my favorite beers. I'm a big sucker for Belgians and Saisons to begin with. And then especially now, it seems like Tank 7 and Boulevard in general, their distribution in the Chicagoland area and outside of KC has definitely grown. And so when I walk into a grocery store or a bar and see this now, it's if I can't figure out what I'm going to have on the menu, it's going to be like, I'll default to Tank 7 because it's one of my favorite tasting beers.
Yeah. I mean, if I see this in like a Jewel around town, no brainer. Like I'm gonna buy it just because it's like the Boulevard Wheat is good, but it's readily available anywhere. Like you could go to Europe and they'll have it. But the Tank 7, if you're just in, I don't know, Jewel, Costco, whatever, and you see like a 4-pack of Tank 7, or like if you're lucky enough to have 12 or 18, I think they bottle on 18. Yeah, no question. Like it's so unique, but so good that, yeah, I'll buy it.
Absolutely. So on a scale of 1 to 10 beers, how many beers do you give this for taste, drinkability, and whatever X factor you want to rate it on?
Yeah, so taste, I would give it probably an 8. I think it's really good. Definitely a good like holiday beer. Thanksgiving is coming up.
Yeah.
hopefully I have at least a 4-pack of these tall boys for myself. Drink responsibly. How about you?
Man, I might even have to rate it higher than that. So it's a weird combination because something that's 8.5% typically would be less drinkable. Very good taste, but less drinkable. Taste, I'll give it a 9. I mean, at least a 9, honestly. It could be like a 9.69, give or take. It's absolutely money.
That is the limiting factor on this beer is not the taste. The limiting factor on this beer is you get to like 4 of them and you're like, oh, like I'm kind of wasted right now.
Exactly. But for a 8.5% beer,
tastes so good.
With that variable in mind, it's like a 10 drinkability because I don't know any other 8.5% beer that I can drink so easily. But overall on this scale, I'd still give it like an 8 drinkability just across the spectrum.
Yeah. I think the variable factor is that it's a 10 out of 10. Like final score 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
I would drink this until I responsibly black out.
Yeah, Tank 7, this is great stuff. Have had it on draft, in a can, in a bottle.
Maybe that is the other variability is like I've had Tank 7. Initially I've had it out of a pint glass, but also having it out of a tall boy tastes just as good. If you go to the brew house and you do the tour, they'll tell you, yeah, like there is a difference in taste based on if you're drinking out of can, or if you're drinking out of bottle, if you're drinking on draft, there's a difference. But for Tank 7, there's definitely a difference, but even drinking it out of a 16-ounce pint can, I think still tastes just as good out of a glass.
Yeah, definitely. So Tank 7, Boulevard Brewing Company. Definitely check it out if it's in a store or a bar near you. It's great stuff. All their beers are good, and they're clearly expanding their distribution as well. So definitely check it out. With that, I know it was a long episode, but it was Nick Symmonds, so it's going to be long. We appreciate his time. We hope you enjoyed it. Beer Mile Podcast, we're going to close out here. Check out the description. We have some show notes about Nick's interview, as well as our other segments. We have some links to Nick's different ventures that he wants to plug, YouTube channel, Run Gum, his book, etc. Check those out as well. Nick is a super entertaining guy. You won't be disappointed. So make sure to check out the description below, the show notes, and anything else that we want to say to the people before they sign off.
3 things. Live, laugh, love. Always.
Always.
If you're going to bet on something, bet on yourself.
Yes.
If you think you can or think you can't, you're right.
What's funny is, as cheesy as those sayings may be, Nick totally confirmed those with us today.
Yeah. I didn't want to interrupt the interview, but we should definitely highlight those because
Absolutely. Yeah. Nick totally stands behind investing in yourself and living and laughing and loving. Well, I don't know. He didn't directly say that, so I'm not going to misquote him in my journalism side of things, but definitely believes in investing in yourself, staying true to what you believe in, voicing your opinion, where it matters, standing up for what you believe in, etc. So appreciate Nick for that. The last thing that I'll say is stay true and drink a brew.
Hell yeah.
Happy to chat. I always say nothing's off limits. You guys can ask me anything. You can't ask me anything I haven't been asked before, probably.
Perfect.
Probably
maybe you can. We'll find out.
That's a challenge for today.